Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gina Marie Agdarian. I am the author of The Letters in the Old House and The Faceless Woman, both available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. I will have a link to purchase both books in the description below. So today is another episode of Book Talk. If you're new here, this is a series where I talk about a book that I recently read, what I liked, what I didn't like, and ultimately help you determine if you might like to read this book. So today I'm talking about Not Our Kind by Kitty Zeldis. This is not a new book. I think it was published in 2018, but I was trying to look for another book by this author in the library and they didn't have it. So I just picked this one up because the subject matter looked interesting. I do like reading historical fiction about the middle of the 20th century. I do find it interesting and fascinating, especially just post World War II, which this does take place in. So the story, I'm giving the story a 3.5 out of 5, but rounding it up to a 4. It certainly was a really, as I mentioned, I enjoy this subject matter. It was an interesting story. It was a good story. There were just some issues that I had with it that I'll explain in just a moment. But the story takes place in New York City, like I said, post World War II. It's Eleanor Moskowitz and Patricia Bellamy, or Bellamy. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. They are two female protagonists. Eleanor is a young Jewish woman living in New York City. Her mother owns and operates a hat shop, and Patricia comes from a very wealthy family. So they come from two different worlds. They meet in a very interesting way. Their cabs get into a car accident, and Eleanor ends up becoming the tutor for Patricia's daughter, Margot, who is 13 years old, and she has recovered from polio, but she unfortunately has some permanent physical issues related to having polio. So she's a private tutor. Eleanor is a private tutor, basically homeschooling Margot, and their worlds are just very different, of course. They live in different neighborhoods in New York City, which if you are not familiar with New York City at all, New York City has a gazillion different neighborhoods and they all have their own personality and their own people that live within them. So everything is just a little bit different as you go through different neighborhoods. So Eleanor, of course, lives in a very Jewish neighborhood. She is, she's obviously Jewish, and she has Jewish friends, and her idea is to meet a Jewish guy to get married and start a family, as one did back then. That was kind of the goal of women back then. Things have definitely changed. And so eventually, Eleanor goes up to Connecticut, to the Bellamy's country home in Connecticut. And some weird things start to happen there. Well, she does start to fall in love with Patricia's very free-spirited brother, who is quite an interesting character in this book. So he's a little bit more bohemian, shall we say. And she starts to fall in love with him. And obviously they are from two very different worlds. He is from one of money and privilege, and she is not. And again, the religious difference back then was a big deal, and she's not allowed in certain places or not welcome in certain places because she's Jewish. So just different worlds altogether. There is a very big incident that occurs with Eleanor, and then she must make a decision of what's going to happen after that incident. And it's just interesting to me that the book was interesting, learning about the differences between Jewish families at that time and then non-Jewish families at that time in America. I am somewhat familiar, with that just from other books I've read and different things that I know personally. I do think some of the flaws in this book, there were just a few. One of them being that some of the characters felt a little bit flat to me. I also thought that they drew Margot as a 13-year-old girl. She was drawn very childish, in my opinion. So while she's 13, obviously she still has a little bit of girl left in her, as opposed to being a woman. She's 13, but she read almost like a 9-year-old to me and not a 13-year-old. And I had to keep checking, like, is she actually supposed to be 13? And she is. She just seemed very immature in a lot of ways. I also didn't I felt like there were a couple of odd things in the book where the author may not have remembered what she was writing. For example, there's a scene, and this is not a spoiler, but there's a scene where Patricia and Eleanor are getting lunch together, and one of them ordered a salad, and the waiter comes and says, "Oh, be careful, the plates are hot," but the plate wouldn't be hot if the salad, if you're getting a salad, it's cold. So just weird, like little things like that. I felt like were kind of overlooked probably by the author's editing team. You know, I get things happen, but the editing team probably missed that. And there were a couple of other similar instances. And again, just some of the characters felt either flat or almost caricaturish, or um, they did things that I'm like, wait, the way this character's been drawn the whole time, not necessarily, this is not necessarily something that they would do according to their other actions in earlier in the book. So just little things like that. I feel like it just could have been tightened up a little bit, I guess you could say. But subject matter, like I said, this all interests me, especially being from New Jersey, having a large Jewish population in my area, and just knowing what I know even about, Jews not being welcome in certain areas, and having their own resorts, even in the Catskills. That's how the Catskills really came to be, with all of those huge resorts, because unfortunately they were not, and wrongfully they were not welcome in a lot of places. So they created their own resorts to retreat to, and that was how the Catskills got so built up like that. But just interesting to read about this character's experience and how she experienced life as a young Jewish woman in New York City. So, Not Our Kind by Kitty Zeldis. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book or if you plan to read this book. And as always, guys, happy reading.